Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, the core of Mercosur, the countries that feed the world. But how well do you know them? How well do I know them? Welcome to Feeding the World, Mercosur Business News, the first video podcast from Mercosur about Mercosur for the world. This comes from 25 years of passion and knowledge as an economist, building bridges between Mercosur and the world. We hope you really enjoy it. This episode of Feeding the World Mercosur Business News brings out my economist and my lecturing side, so bear with me. I've got a notebook, I've got a pen, and I'm here on my most lecturing side, but I'm not going to bore you with loads of stats. I just want to share with you why Mercosur is important, but on a very different way from what you're used to. We're not going to talk about politics. We're not going to talk about the stuff that you're used to. We're going to talk straight about business and what Mercosur is important to those of you outside the region who want to buy from us, and what is important for you outside Mercosur that want to sell to us in the region. So let's start discussing why Mercosur matters to you. And let's start discussing two sides: the exporters from Mercosur and the importers in Mercosur. So Mercosur feeds the world. Mercosur produces food for all over the world. And basically, we got here exporters of a lot of products that I'm going to name in a minute. That means that companies here, from production through to logistics, through to industry, are exporting all over the world goods and services that matter to you. It also means that we are importing goods and services to make all of that happening. And in the middle, there's a lot of trading, as I said, logistics, and there's a lot going on. We're going to start figuring out throughout this podcast in the upcoming episodes. So when we're talking about exporters, we're talking about the biggest animal protein companies in the world. You probably heard about them: Minerva, BRF, Marfrig. We're talking about JBS. We're talking about Conaprole. We're talking about some of the companies that dominate the food and drink market all over the world. Those are exporters. But of course, they also import inputs, machinery, and all sorts of products and services. For the last 15 years, I have worked with these companies on a daily basis. I have supported companies from all over the world do business with them. So let me give you a list. I'm going to read this out because otherwise I'm going to get all muddled up. So what do we actually import from countries like yours, from businesses like yours? Let's start with the plant side of things. Let's make this simple. We import agricultural machinery. We import fertilizers, agrochemicals, bioinputs, plant nutrition. I used to work for an English company called Omex, who do agri-fluids, crop protection, you know the stuff, plant genetics. For example, I used to work for a company from Scarborough in the UK called PBS International. They do pollination control bags in the middle of Scarborough for all over the world. Also seeds, you know, your Advantas, your Syngentas, your Monsantos, your big companies, they're all here. Animal genetics. I work a lot with New Zealand, and we import dairy and cattle genetics, beef cattle genetics from the UK, from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all over the world. That's big money, by the way. Animal nutrition products. I work for two British companies that do animal nutrition products from Ireland as well. Agritech, you name it, robotics, automation, the like. So we're buying all those products and services. The farmers that are here and all the logistics chain and all the supply chain from Mercosur is actually buying all these goods and services. We're actually buying logistics and services and products for the forestry sector, which is actually really big in Mercosur. Forestry means not just wood, it means cellulose as well, big business. Our industry, as I said, our abattoirs, for example, all the processing side of things actually buys a lot of technology, products and services from countries and from companies like you. When I talk about Mercosur, I'm not just talking about beef, I'm talking about poultry. Brazil is the main poultry exporter in the world. I'm talking about pork. Brazil is a powerhouse in terms of pork and poultry. We're talking about eggs. The global market for eggs is enormous, and Brazil there is one of the biggest players, if not the biggest. I'm talking about lamb. I'm also talking about textiles. Look, this is merino wool from Uruguay, from rural Lanas. We're talking about cotton, for example, from Argentina. In terms of exporters, I'm talking about Montes del Plata and UPM, which are based here in Uruguay, Suzano, based in Brazil. I'm talking about farmers, and we are interviewing a few here, farmer cooperatives. I'm talking about governments that actually are big buyers, but also think about the labs, think about the research centers, the cooperation, but also the equipment, the instruments that they need to make all of that happen. We're talking about services as well. I worked for 3 years as the regional director of a New Zealand company that specialized in traceability solutions. Traceability is big for all of these products. Why? Because our exporters from all of these goods that I just mentioned, from all of this food that feeds the world, needs to comply with international standards, not just from the European Union, and that's where the new trade agreement comes into place, and all the EUDR and everything else we know about, but also demanding markets like the US, Japan, and other global markets, EFTA that we have an agreement with, they are demanding that sort of solutions. So traceability, all sorts of certifications. Episode 1, Sebastian discussed some of those certifications, labeling, packaging, advertising, marketing, PR. There's a lot of global agencies involved in selling that to the agricultural sector here in Mercosur, in the 4 countries, again, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. So certification is big business here, and it tends to come from global businesses. What else do we produce? Of course, soybean, of course, sorghum. What do we use that for around the world? Mainly to feed animals. So when you have your Danish bacon in Europe, most of the time that animal feed is going to have come from Mercosur. Also, for example, rice, biofuels, citrus, malt, that all comes from Mercosur. And we need your inputs to make this happen. But also we are exporting to your countries, and we need your markets, and we need your help to enter those markets. In terms of Uruguay, Brazil, we also do leather, and that's big business. When we're talking about Uruguayan soybean, or we're talking about Brazilian beef, or Argentinian wine, or Paraguayan stevia, it's not just that. There's probably about 20, 30 countries involved in a chunk of Uruguayan beef, or in a ton of Brazilian soybean. It's not just Uruguayan, it's global. These supply chains are integrated, which means we are all responsible as consumers, as businesses. These are global supply chains, and we should understand how they work, not just how we can make money, but how we can bring sustainability to this whole supply chains. Let me give you some numbers, and let me read. Uruguay last year, 2025, exported $4.5 billion of beef. Forestry sector, $2.7 billion US, and agricultural exports, $2.6 billion US. Those are really big numbers. Uruguayan services sectors represented 31% of our exports, and actually trading represented 7% of our export. A lot of trading is done in the agriculture sectors. Traders play a really big role in Mercosur. They're all here. Just like brands like John Deere or Case have been here for a long time, the big traders, the names you all know them, have been here for a very long time. ICT, agri-tech, robotics, automation, big business, pharmaceuticals, anything has to do with animal health, that's big business. Mercosur buys and sells and integrates into those supply chains. Companies like Verback that you heard of, Beringer Ingel, sorry about the pronunciation for the Germans. I was also privileged to be part of the inauguration with New Zealand Trade and Enterprise of Auckland Biosciences Montesera plant in Uruguay a few months ago, which is actually the biggest New Zealand investment in Latin America by Auckland Biosciences in the history of the company. And it's actually fetal bovine serum plant, and is the only time that this company has invested outside Australia and New Zealand. That means that they trust Mercosur, not just for buying and selling, but also for sourcing raw materials and for exporting from this region to the world. Brazil, what can I tell you about Brazil? It's the powerhouse. If Brazil stopped selling food to the world, we would all starve. That's just as it goes, as easy as it is. Record beef exports from Brazil in 2025. In terms of tons, 3.1 million tons, but also in terms of dollars, $16.6 billion of just beef exports, mainly to China. If you just took into account poultry and pork, the numbers would be, continent sized, just like Brazil is. There's a big difference between cold or refrigerated meat and frozen meat or frozen beef. That's something we can discuss, but all of you in the beef trade will understand this. So a lot of that beef, particularly refrigerated beef, goes into the European Union, and that's big business. Grains, as I said, pork, poultry, that goes to China, but it also goes to the European Union and to the US. At the same time, you got countries like Argentina and Paraguay, and we run out of time today, but I will let you know in a future episode what's going on in Paraguay and in Argentina. But there's also niches. It's not just about beef and soybean and cellulose. It's about wine, it's about stevia, it's about peanuts, it's about pistachios, it's about leather, it's about honey, it's about herbs, it's about olive oil, it's about lemons from Tucumán, and it's about apples from Uruguay. It's about an awful lot of things that you probably never heard of, and maybe that's where your niche is. Not in this extensive agriculture, not in the big headlines of the newspapers that you might be used to. It's actually in the things that you probably haven't even thought of. And that's where we want to add value in this video podcast. That's what we feel we are unique. And that's what I hope that you, myself, and everybody that's part of this community can share knowledge, can spot those niches, and we can grow business together. Thank you. One thing I haven't actually told you about is why we've chosen Punta del Este and specifically the Grand Hotel to film this video podcast. Punta del Este is a wonderful seaside resort in Uruguay. It would be like the Saint-Tropez of South America. And here we have tourists from Brazil, from Argentina, or from Paraguay who love this spot. I actually live in Punta del Este, so I am very lucky. There's a lot of beautiful farms nearby, so we are very lucky to be here. And why the Grand Hotel? First of all, because they got a wonderful team. They're a top hotel. They got beautiful places where we can film. They got a convention center that you can just about see behind me. They got the best service. They got beautiful locations, a wonderful view of the beach, and they just made it so easy and so wonderful for us. And they will make it easy, wonderful, and top class for you too. So thank you, Martin. Thank you to the Grand Hotel. It's a real privilege to be filming here. And to all of you, thank you for joining us again. And don't forget, if you spawn any Mercosur, Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Paraguay produce in your countries all over the world, send us pictures, and then we'll become a true community. See you next time. One thing I haven't actually told you about is why we've chosen Punta del Este and specifically the Grand Hotel to film this video podcast. Punta del Este is a wonderful seaside resort in Uruguay. It would be like the Saint-Tropez of South America. And here we have tourists from Brazil, from Argentina or from Paraguay who love this sport. There's a lot of beautiful farms nearby, so we are very lucky to be here. And why the Grand Hotel? First of all, because they got a wonderful team. They're a top hotel. They got beautiful places where we can film. They got a convention center that you can just about see behind me. They got the best service. They got beautiful locations, a wonderful view of the beach, and they just made it so easy and so wonderful for us. And they will make it easy, wonderful, and top class for you too. So thank you, Martin. Thank you to the Grand Hotel. It's a real privilege to be filming here. And to all of you, thank you for joining us again. And don't forget, if you spawn any Mercosur, Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Paraguay produce in your countries all over the world, send us pictures and then we'll become a true community. See you next time.